The Dirlewanger Brigade, also known as the Sturmbrigade Dirlewanger, December 19, 1944, or the 36th Waffengrenadier Division of the SS, German 36. Waffengrenadier Division der SS, or the Black Hunters German, Die Schwarzenjäger, was a unit of the Waffen-SS during World War II. The unit, named after its commander Oskar Dirlewanger, consisted of convicted criminals, other prisoners and some volunteers. Originally formed from convicted poachers in 1940 and first deployed for counterinsurgency duties against the Polish resistance movement, the brigade saw service in German-occupied Eastern Europe, with an especially active role in the anti-partisan operations in Belarus. The unit is regarded as the most brutal and notorious Waffen-SS unit, with its soldiers described as the ideal genocidal killers who neither gave nor expected quarter. The unit is regarded as the most infamous Waffen-SS unit in Poland and Belarus, and was one of the worst military units in modern European history in terms of criminality and cruelty. During its operations, the unit participated in the mass murder of civilians and committed other atrocities in German-occupied Eastern Europe. It gained a reputation among Wehrmacht and the Waffen-SS officers for its brutality. It epitomized the anti-partisan activity on the Eastern Front that emerged from the image of the hunt and the animalization of the enemy. The unit continuously committed sadistic acts of violence, torture, rape and murder, and enjoyed plundering wherever they went, even killing each other during looting. Dirlewanger himself often beat and killed his own troops as well, especially when they displeased him. According to French historian Christian Ingrao, Dirlewanger's unit committed the worst atrocities of the Second World War, while the American historian Timothy Snyder noted they committed more atrocities than any other. The operation was one of the largest anti-partisan campaigns conducted by the Germans in Belarus. At least 20,000 victims were killed, while German losses remained minimal, with fewer than 60 soldiers killed in action. Not everyone was impressed with Dirlewanger's actions. A civilian propaganda officer who toured the Operation Cottbus area reported witnessing horrific scenes. Some partisans had been burned alive, and their charred remains were being eaten by roaming pigs. Wilhelm Kuba, the general commissar of General Bezirk Ruthenian, protested Dirlewanger's actions, raising his concerns through Alfred Rosenberg to Himmler. In response, Gottlob Berger dismissed the accusations as nonsense, insisting that Dirlewanger's battalion was not as described. In a post-war testimony, an anonymous member of the SS Sonderbataillon Dirlewanger recalled what he witnessed during an anti-partisan operation in Belarus. During a march and we had driven 200 kilometers close to Smolensk. The villages were encircled. Nobody was allowed to leave or enter. The fields were searched and the people were sent back to the village. The next morning around 6 a.m. all these people, it was a larger village with approximately 2,500 people, children, women, the elderly, were pushed into 4 or 5 barns. Then Dirlewanger appeared with 10 men, officers, etc. and said, "Shoot them all immediately." In front of the barn, he positioned 4 SD men with machine pistols. The barn was opened and Dirlewanger said, "Fire freely." Then there was indiscriminate shooting into the crowd of humans with the machine pistols, without distinction whether children, women, etc. were hit. It was a most horrendous action. The magazines were taken out, new ones were inserted. The unit killed at least 30,000 and possibly over 120,000 civilians in Belarus alone. Then new aiming started. After that, the barn was closed again. The SD men removed straw from the roofs and set the barns on fire. This was the most horrible spectacle which I have ever seen in my life. The barns were burning brightly. Nobody could escape until the barns fell down. Meanwhile, Dirlewanger and his staff positioned themselves with the Russian rapid-fire guns about 50 meters away from the barn. Then from the barn some lightly wounded, some heavily wounded and others who had not yet been hit stormed out, burning all over their bodies. Now these bastards shot these people who tried to escape with Dirlewanger in front, until there was nobody left. I have witnessed this example which I have described in at least 4 or 5 other cases. Each of these villages was leveled down to the ground. According to historian Timothy Snyder, as it inflicted its first 15,000 mortal casualties, the Special Commando Dirlewanger lost only 92 men, many of them, no doubt, to friendly fire and alcoholic accidents. A ratio such as that was possible only when the victims were unarmed civilians. In September 1942, the unit murdered 8,350 Jews in Baranovichi ghetto, and then a further 389 people labeled bandits, and 1,274 bandit suspects. According to the historian Martin Kitchen, the unit committed such shocking atrocities in the Soviet Union, in the pursuit of partisans, that even an SS court was called upon to investigate. A witness reported Dirlewanger men roasting captured partisans alive, and then throwing their bodies to a herd of hungry pigs. Women were raped and then kept as sexual cattle, in which they would be traded amongst the men for 2 bottles of vodka, with even children being raped and tortured to death. Several German commanders and officials attempted to remove Dirlewanger from command and to dissolve the unit, but powerful patrons within the Nazi apparatus protected Dirlewanger and intervened on his behalf. On August 10, 1943, the expansion of the battalion to regimental size was authorized by SS Führungshauptamt under Hans Tschner. However, the order faced delays due to a shortage of soldiers to fill the newly planned regiment, and a lack of weapons to equip them to overcome this problem. Dirlewanger armed his troops with captured Soviet weapons stocks. The actual expansion of the unit into a regiment did not begin until May 1944, when 2 battalions were formed from the original 1st Company and 2nd Company. The formation of a 3rd battalion was delayed due to a shortage of men and did not occur until August 1944. Recruits were to come from criminals, Eastern Volunteers (Ostruppen), and military delinquents. On February 19, 1944, permission to take volunteers from concentration camps was granted by Himmler in order to fill the battalion before it could be expanded to a regiment. Over 700 men signed up as volunteers for the battalion, and most of them arrived in June 1944. Additionally, the battalion included 300 anti-communists from Soviet territory. In November 1943, the battalion went into action with Army Group Center to halt the Soviet advance, and suffered extreme casualties due to ineptitude. On late November, Dirlewanger was sent home to Germany in Esslingen am Neckar to recover from his 11th wound after a recent battle, where a bullet grazed across his right arm and chest. While Dirlewanger was absent, the battalion's adjutant, SS Hauptsturmführer Erwin Walser, took the position of acting battalion commander, while SS Hauptsturmführer Kurt Weiss assumed the role of adjutant, which he held until the end of the war. Dirlewanger received the German Cross in Gold on December 5, 1943 in recognition of his earnestness, but by December 30, 1943, the unit consisted of only 259 men. Amongst other actions, the unit took part in the destruction of Warsaw in late 1944, and in the Walla massacre of more than 50,000 of Warsaw's inhabitants in August 1944 during the Warsaw Uprising, as well as in the brutal suppression of the Slovak National Uprising of August to October 1944. In January 1944, Dirlewanger came back to Belarus to take the command back and put Walser in the position of personnel officer. Large numbers of amnestied criminals were sent to rebuild the battalion, and by late February 1944, the battalion was back to full strength. It was decided that Eastern Volunteers would no longer be admitted to the unit, as the Russians had proven to be particularly unreliable in combat until April 24, 1944. Their communications relied on the attached Wehrmacht units available. This changed when a 16-man platoon was transferred to the regiment from the SS-administered Postschutz in Berlin. None of these transferred troops had a criminal record nor were assigned any probationary tasks. On June 26, 1944, an attachment of German Ordnungspolizei artillerymen led by Hauptmann der Schutzpolizei Joseph Steinhauer was assigned to the 2nd Battalion. Steinhauer was later appointed by Dirlewanger as the 2nd Battalion's commander. In March 1944, Hauptmann der Schutzpolizei Herbert Meyer volunteered to serve in the battalion and was assigned as the commander of the 1st Company. Meyer had been convicted of petty theft and embezzlement in November 1942 and was sent to the Danzig-Moskau prison. He later served as the commander of the 1st Battalion in Warsaw in August 1944 and remained in this position until the end of the war. On June 30, 1944, the regiment reported a total strength of 17 officers and 954 men, including non-commissioned officers. This strength does not include the 769 upcoming volunteers from several concentration camps that will be sent to the SS-Company Dirlewanger stationed in Minsk. The eponymous Dirlewanger Brigade was led by World War I veteran and habitual offender, Oskar Dirlewanger, considered by whom an amoral violent alcoholic who was claimed to have possessed a sadistic sexual fetish and a barbaric nature. Anti-partisan operations continued until June 1944, When the Soviets launched Operation Bagration, which was aimed at the destruction of the Army Group Center, the unit was caught up in the retreat and began falling back to the town of Lida. Under the Kampfgruppe von Gottberg, the unit held their position against the Soviets so that the remaining retreating Germans have the time to fall back to safety. The regiment sustained heavy casualties during several rearguard actions, and were detached from Kampfgruppe von Gottberg on July 20, 1944. At the same time, they were sent to East Prussia for reconstitution at the Ares Training Center in the town of Elwitke. The Sonderregiment arrived on July 21, 1944 and used their time to reorganize its regiment and received replacement. In late July 1944, Dirlewanger left the regiment and flew to Berlin to lobby Gottlieb Berger for more troops and equipment. The command of the regiment was given temporarily to SS Hauptsturmführer Kurt Weiss. The command was returned to Dirlewanger when he flew back from Germany in August 1944. When the Armia Krajowa began the Warsaw Uprising on August 1, 1944, SS Sonderregiment Dirlewanger was sent into action under the command of SS Sturmbannführer Kurt Weiss, as part of the Kampfgruppe formation led by SS Gruppenführer Heinz Reinfarth, once again serving alongside Bronislaw Kaminsky's militia, now named Waffensturmbrigade Rona. On August 3, 1944, the regiment was informed to form a battalion-sized Kampfgruppen to support the suppression of the uprising. The first Kampfgruppe was formed out of the 1st Battalion and was named Kampfgruppe Meyer, with a strength of 356 men, excluding additional support troops. It was commanded by SS Obersturmführer Herbert Meyer, who had now been fully rehabilitated. The second Kampfgruppe was formed from the regiment's 2nd Battalion and was named Kampfgruppe Steinhauer, led by Hauptmann der Schupo Joseph Steinhauer, with a strength of 350 men. After enlisting in the German army as a machine gunner in 1913, Dirlewanger served in the 13th Royal Württemberg Corps, rising to the rank of lieutenant, and receiving the Iron Cross 1st and 2nd class during World War I. They arrived on August 6, 1944, and both Kampfgruppen were placed under the command of Reinfarth. On August 4, 1944, Kampfgruppe Meyer departed for Warsaw by truck and arrived that night at the western outskirts of the city and stayed at Bernerow Airfield. On the same day, Dirlewanger received a telegram directly from Reichsführer Himmler which read, "Although I am very satisfied with your actions, as I recently told you personally, I must express my dissatisfaction that, despite the instruction to proceed immediately to your regiment by airplane which had been prepared for you, you still wasted time in Berlin. I am accustomed to quick and immediate obedience." Dirlewanger then traveled to East Prussia by car and reunited with a portion of his regiment, which had prepared to depart for Warsaw. Without further hesitation, Dirlewanger sought additional soldiers and equipment to reinforce his unit. This included attempts to gather men from military prisons and SS penal camps in locations such as Glatz, Kodskoe, Anklam, Torgau, Danzig-Moskau and Dachau, where Dirlewanger received an additional 2,400 men on September 24, 1944. On August 5, 1944, under the leadership of Weiss, Kampfgruppe Meyer began their assault on the Walla district, advancing along the Litzmannstadtstrasse, while the Posen police group advanced north of the street. The assault was delayed and continued into the night due to the street being heavily defended. On August 6, 1944, Kampfgruppe Steinhauer arrived in Warsaw and, along with Kampfgruppe Meyer, immediately began their attack to reach the BRHL Palace. They eventually had advanced through Kladna and Elektoralna streets. On the evening of August 7, 1944, after receiving orders from Himmler to return to his regiment, Dirlewanger flew back from Germany and united the two Kampfgruppen to form Kampfgruppe Dirlewanger. He joined the Freikorps and took part in crushing the German Revolution of 191,819 after graduating from Frankfurt's Goethe University with a doctorate in political science in 1922. He worked at a bank and at a knitwear factory. By August 7, Dirlewanger had occupied the Saxon Gardens and had linked with other German troops on the Kier-Bedzia bridge the next day. They reached the palace and also captured the theater square. During the assault, several hospitals were burned down, except for St. Stanislaw Hospital, which was later used as the regiment's headquarters. On August 8, 1944, SS Untersturmführer Max Schreiner, an experienced member of the regiment, led a group of troops in an assault on the market hall. This decisive action led to the complete defeat of the retreating Polish insurgents. Schreiner's assault played a crucial role in the immediate capture of the BRHL Palace. When most of its units including headquarters, the Heavy Machine Gun Company, Heavy Mortar Company, an anti-tank gun platoon finally arrived in Warsaw, the Sonderregiment submitted its first combat strength report on August 8. It recorded 881 men present for duty, including 16 officers. This was 3 days after Kampfgruppe Meyer had begun fighting. After retaking the BRHL Palace and rescuing Warsaw Battle Commander Generalleutnant Rainer Stahel, the regiment regrouped that evening as Kampfgruppe Dirlewanger. Dirlewanger, with the Waffensturmbrigade Rona, are notorious for being the two units which committed the worst crimes during the Warsaw Uprising. Dirlewanger had a reputation for burying women and children alive. A witness reported drunken soldiers practicing cesarean sections with bayonets. During the massacres, Dirlewanger was notorious for plundering, with it being noted that the desire to plunder so great that they cut off fingers with a single blow, on which they noticed rings. So as not to waste time, they took out gold teeth with bayonets, and while plundering out of greed, they killed each other. By 1923, he had joined the Nazi Party. In 1934, he was sentenced to 2 years' imprisonment for contributing to the delinquency of a minor with whom he was sexually involved, and for stealing government property. In what became known as the Walla Massacre, Dirlewanger personnel, along with police units under command of Heinz Reinfarth, massacred Polish combatants along with civilian men, women and children, in the Walla district of Warsaw. However, the role of Dirlewanger in the Walla Massacre itself may have been limited in the beginning days, and Dirlewanger may not have arrived himself until the 7th of August. Up to 40,000 civilians were murdered in Walla in less than 2 weeks of August, including all hospital patients and staff. According to the historian Alex J.K., Dirlewanger murdered some 12,500 people on August 5. Dirlewanger burned prisoners alive with gasoline, impaled babies on bayonets and stuck them out of windows, and hung women upside down from balconies. Polish nurses were repeatedly raped, and in some instances, hand grenades were inserted into their vaginas and detonated, while other times a shouting and flute concerto followed with the driving of women to the gallows. Many otherwise unknown crimes committed by the unit at Walla were later revealed by Matthias Schenk, a Belgian national who was serving in the area as a German army sapper. Regarding an incident in which hundreds of Polish children were murdered, Schenk stated, "We blew up the doors. I think of a school. Children were standing in the hall and on the stairs. Lots of children, all with their small hands up. We looked at them for a few moments until Dirlewanger ran in. He ordered to kill them all. They shot them and then they were walking over their bodies and breaking their little heads with butt ends. Blood and brain matter streamed down the stairs. There is a memorial plaque in that place stating that 350 children were killed. I think there were many more, maybe 500. Schenk noted the often mass rape of female civilians in cellars and basement, and noted an incident where the men of the brigade raided a cellar and noted the brutal death of a Polish girl. Every time when we stormed the cellars and women were inside, the Dirlewanger soldiers raped them. The conviction led to him being expelled from the Nazi Party, but he was permitted to reapply for membership. Soon after his release, Dirlewanger was rearrested for sexual assault and sent to a concentration camp at Welsheim. Many times a group raped the same woman quickly, still holding weapons in their hands. Then after one of the fights, I was standing shaking by the wall and couldn't calm my nerves. Dirlewanger soldiers burst in. One of them took a woman. She was pretty, she wasn't screaming. Then he was raping her, pushing her head strongly against the table, holding a bayonet in the other hand. First he cut open her blouse. Then one cut from stomach to throat. Blood gushed. The regiment arrived in Warsaw with only 865 enlisted personnel and 16 officers, but it soon received 2,500 replacements. These included 1,900 German convicts from the SS military camp at Danzig-Moskau. Extremely high casualties were inflicted on the unit during fighting in Warsaw by the Polish resistance. During the course of the 2-month urban warfare, Dirlewanger's regiment lost 2,733 men, 315% of the unit's initial strength. While some of the regiment's actions were criticized by Erich von dem Boxalewski, who after the war described them as a herd of pigs, and the sector commander General Major Terror, Dirlewanger was promoted to SS Oberfuhrer Reserve on August 12, 1944, and was recommended for the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross on September 30, 1944 by Reinfarth. He actually received the medal on October 16, 1944 at a reception hall of the Wawel Royal Castle in Krakow, and it was presented by Hans Frank. In gratitude for the presentation of the award, Dirlewanger wrote to Hitler's SS adjutant, Hauptsturmführer Otto Nschee, 3 weeks later and told him, Oh, you know as well as I do that I received this high award for the soldierly achievements of my regiment, among other things. With this, the last unwelcome voices from higher places about my unit should have faded away. My men have achieved superhuman things in this fight to the death and destruction and have earned themselves a place in the honor book of the German soldier by their sweat, blood, and heroic sacrificial commitment. During one fierce fight on August 6, 1944, Dirlewanger's men used civilians as body shields. Dirlewanger's men spread out along the square and with armor support, rooted out several insurgent positions. Then the Sonderkommando attempted to advance further using a shield of Polish women and children in front of them, but the Poles fired anyway and drove the Germans back. By October 3, 1944, the remaining Polish insurgents had surrendered and the remnants of the regiment spent the next month guarding the line along the Vistula. In desperation, he contacted his old World War I comrade Gottlob Berger, who was now a senior Nazi working closely with Reichsführer Heinrich Himmler. During this time, the regiment was unofficially referred as a brigade in the message traffic. The journalist and history writer Nigel Cawthorne noted how Dirlewanger committed worse atrocities than the Kamiński Brigade, and how they enjoyed committing them, encouraged by their commander as a Oberster Oskar Dirlewanger, who told them to take no prisoners. The Dirlewanger troops looted, gang-raped women and children, played bayonet catch with live babies and tortured captives by hacking off their arms, dousing them with petrol and setting them alight to run flaming down the street. The soldiers' behavior was so bad that even Himmler became alarmed. He ordered a battalion of SS military policemen to stand by, in case the Dirlewanger troops turned on their own leaders or on nearby German units. The regiment played a large part in putting down the rebellion. By October 30, the unit was still considered under strength even after grown into a 4-battalion force, prompting Dirlewanger to seek additional manpower. Before their departure from Warsaw, the strength of the unit was approximately less than 4,500 men after receiving the nearly 2,000 probationary troops from Wehrmacht prison, detention facilities and punishment cells. On October 7, Dirlewanger toured several concentration camps in search of recruits for his understrength unit. During his visit to the Flossenburg concentration camp, he met with the camp's commandant, SS Sturmbannführer Egon Zill. Zill proposed an idea to Dirlewanger to recruit communist and socialist prisoners into his ranks. SS Gruppenführer Richard Jelcke and SS Standartenführer Hermann Piester also had advised Dirlewanger to try form a unit consisting of former political opponent of the Nazi Party. Dirlewanger wrote a letter to Himmler, requesting approval for the idea of recruiting political prisoners into his unit on October 15, 1944. Himmler approved the request. With the Slovak national uprising still ongoing, the regiment was deployed to Slovakia on October 10, 1944. They began its rail movement towards Slovakia and reached Nitra by October 12. Berger used his influence to help Dirlewanger join the Condor Legion, a German unit which fought in the Spanish Civil War. 1936–1939. On October 16, 1944, elements of the regiment were strafed and bombed by several Lag-5 planes belonging to the Slovakian Air Force near the train station at Diviaki. On the same day, Dirlewanger received his long-awaited Knight's Cross in Krakow. On October 18, 1944, the regiment launched an assault to capture the area near Ostro Mountain. 2 days later, they renewed the attack but made little to no progress against the determined defenders. On October 25, the regiment finally succeeded in capturing the towns of Bílý Potok and Nekbali after intense fighting. Between the 27th and the 30th of October, the regiment continued its operations, engaging in relentless combat against Slovakian partisans in the surrounding areas. By October 30, Bansk Bystrica had been fully taken, and the resistance had been completely crushed, allowing the regiment to continue their formation in the town of Revka. As part of their usual anti-partisan duties, the regiment proceeded to eliminate any remaining small elements of partisans who had fled into the surrounding areas. By November 1944, the command structure of the regiment's infantry unit are as below. With the outcome of the war no longer in doubt, large numbers of communist and socialist political prisoners began applying to join the unit in the hopes of defecting to the Soviets. On November 3, 1944, the SS Main Economic and Administrative Office had issued quotas to all primary concentration camps for the suitable selection of political prisoners. The quota for political prisoner volunteers, that totaled up to 1,910 men, are as follows. The recruitment process underwent for first 2 weeks of November. Unfortunately, only 770 volunteers from all of the camps are accepted as recruited. To make up the missing 1,140 men, Dirlewanger recruited a mix of asocial elements and career criminals, bringing the total number of recruits to the targeted 1,910. The political prisoners received their training in either Krakow or Moose. On his return to Germany in 1939, Berger helped Dirlewanger join the Allgemeine SS General SS, with the rank of SS Obersturmführer. In December, the regiment was sent to the front in Hungary. While fighting there, 2 battalions made up of communist and socialist volunteers fell apart. During a month of fighting, the regiment suffered many casualties and was pulled back to Slovakia to refit and reorganize. On December 14, 1944, Soviet forces advancing from Hont launched an assault and surrounded the town of Ipolizk, eventually capturing it. At the time, the town was defended by only 60 lightly armed men from the 3rd Company of the Mixed Battalion, which has been subordinated to a Sturm Regiment. To the next day, on December 15, 1944, the 2 battalions 2/Sturm Regiment 2 and 3/Sturm Regiment 2 were positioned south of Ipolizk in the hilly area. On the morning of the following day, an artillery barrage was directed at their position by Soviet forces. Soon after, a dozen tanks began attacking the 2nd Battalion, but then shifted their assault toward the 3rd Battalion's position suddenly. Almost everyone from every company start to jump from their trench and throw their weapons away. A mass desertion that had already been planned since November. The 2 battalions' leadership was left dumbfounded by what had just happened, and it was decided that the 2 battalions were to retreat to the area between Bernice-Bardi and Kamenz. Almost over 700 men defected to the Red Army during the battle, most of them political prisoners recruited by Dirlewanger in November. In the morning of December 15, 1944, shortly after the battle had begun, Generaloberst Johannes Friesner, the commander-in-chief of the Army Group South in which Dirlewanger is subordinated to, decided to visit Dirlewanger's command post, which located in Palst. He was rather unimpressed. He described Dirlewanger as not very appealing adventurer type, sitting calmly behind his desk with a pet monkey on his shoulder. In mid-1940, after the invasion of Poland, Berger arranged for Dirlewanger to command and train a military unit of convicted poachers for partisan hunting, Bandenbekämpfung. When questioned about the current situation, Dirlewanger did not know where the front line was, nor was he aware of the status of Buchmann's operation. Dirlewanger's adjutant, Kurt Weiss, made a better impression with his acknowledgement about the front line and the current situation. That same morning, Buchmann's command post was positioned east of Dahlen-Turufs. To his west, Steinhauer's battalion launched a counterattack to recapture Ipolizk. Meanwhile, to the east, Meyer's battalion and Pioneer Battalion 114 provided suppressing fire against Soviet positions at Magash and Somos to support Steinhauer's advance. At the same time, 3/Sturm Regiment 1 Polak's battalion was redeploying to a new position along the Margarethi line. The main brigade command post was located farther back at Horn-Turufs, where all the brigade staff were stationed, including Dirlewanger and Weiss. That evening, a single T-34 tank with several Soviet soldiers riding on it, possibly a reconnaissance team, was spotted at Steinhauer's left flank, moving directly toward Kister, where Buchmann's command post was located. However, it was halted by defensive fire from the 2nd and 4th Companies of the Mixed Battalion, which had been stationed near Kister in reserve to support Sturm Regiment 2. After the engagement, the 2 companies successfully blocked the tank's advance and drove off the accompanying infantry with concentrated fire. The tank, under increasing pressure, was forced to retreat. Unfortunately, however, the counterattack failed to materialize when Soviet forces launched a larger-scale assault from Ipolizk. That same afternoon, the renewed offensive forced Steinhauer to retreat eastward toward Homty. Meyer's battalion, along with the remnants of Pioneer Battalion 114, was also forced to withdraw far from their original positions. Buchmann's command post was heavily overrun, prompting its relocation to a new position south of Slatina. In March 1940, Adolf Hitler received a letter from the wife of an old fighter party member, who revealed that her husband had been arrested and convicted for poaching in one of Germany's national forests. In unclear circumstances, SS Hauptsturmführer Harold Maum, commander of the 5th Company, 2nd Battalion, Sturm Regiment 2, found himself at the banks of the Kastampa River. There, he gathered retreating troops and formed a Kampfgruppe, which came to be known as Kampfgruppe Maum. Utilizing the regiment's field gun, the ad hoc unit managed to hold off the advancing Soviet tanks. From 18 to December 21, Soviet forces continued to gain ground steadily. Mom's position was eventually overrun, forcing his Kampfgruppe to retreat. The Soviet advance pushed dangerously close to Dirlewanger's main headquarters in Demd. In response, Meyer's and Polak's battalions launched a counterattack, but it failed to achieve any significant results. During this period, Ehlers was reassigned from his role as a battalion commander to take command of Sturm Regiment II, replacing Buchmann, who was in turn appointed to lead as Sturm Regiment I. On December 19, 1944, the SS Sonderregiment Dirlewanger was officially titled as 2 SS Sturm Brigade Dirlewanger. The brigade continued fighting throughout the entire month, and was eventually withdrawn from the front line on December 31, 1944. It spent the following month stationed in Bratislava. By January 2, 1945, after the disastrous Battle of Ipolisag, the 2. SS Sturm Brigade Dirlewanger had only the remaining combat strength of 2,489 men. On February 2, 1945, orders were given to the Sturm Brigade to be in train for the Oder front after moving through Dresden. The brigade arrived at their new assembly point in Guben and their assembly completed by February 12, 1945. On February 14, 1945, the brigade was committed to battle against the incoming Red Army, and was renamed the 36th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS. With its expansion to a division of 4,000 men, regular army units were attached to the formation, a grenadier regiment, a pioneer brigade, and a panzerger battalion. He had been caught hunting without a license or permit, a serious offense. The woman, in her desperate plea, begged Hitler to release her husband. Individual Sturmpioneer demolition engineers had already been attached to the force during the fighting in Warsaw. The next day, Dirlewanger was seriously wounded in combat for the 12th time during the counterattack to recapture the town of Sommerfeld. He was sent to the rear and Schmieds took command. Dirlewanger would not return to the division. The division was pushed back to the northeast when the final Soviet offensive began on April 16, 1945. Desertion became more and more common, and when Schmieds attempted to reorganize the division on April 25, he found that it had virtually ceased to exist. On April 28, 1945, SS Sturmbannführer Ewald Ehlers, who now commanded the 73rd Waffen Grenadier Regiment, was severely wounded and lost an arm during the battle in Halby, according SS Hauptsturmführer Harold Mahm, who commanded the 2. Battalion in Ehlers's regiment. On May 1, 1945, the Soviets wiped out all that was left of the unit in the Halby pocket. Only a small remnant of the division managed an escape attempt to reach the U.S. Army lines on the Elbe River. SS Obersturmbannführer Kurt Weiss led a large group of around 400 men escaping from Halby pocket. He was later put in British captivity, and escaped on March 5, 1946. His later fate is unknown. Schmieds and his staff, excluding Kurt Weiss, were taken prisoner in Soviet captivity. Schmieds was not charged with any crime and discharged shortly due to poor health. Only about 700 men of the division survived the war. In June 1945, Dirlewanger was captured by French forces in Germany and died in their custody by June 8, allegedly beaten to death by Polish soldiers in Altschausen. SS Assault Brigade Dirlewanger, December 19, 1944, 36th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS, March 1945. The cross grenades emblem of the division is still used by neo-Nazis, such as the Wolf's Brigade 44. She proposed that he be sent to the front line to regain his honor, believing that such an act would allow him to redeem himself and restore the honor. A Swedish neo-Nazi rock band named Dirlewanger rose to infamy in the 1990s as they reportedly were one of the Swedish neo-Nazi scene's most popular groups. Gottlob Berger revealed that the letter was the main basis for the unit's founding during his interrogation by the International Military Tribunal. He also stated that the Special Dirlewanger Brigade owes its existence to an order of Adolf Hitler given in 1940 while the campaign in the West was still going on. One day Himmler called me up and told me that Hitler had ordered all men convicted of poaching with firearms who were in prison were to be collected and formed into a special detachment. That Hitler should have such a somewhat unusual and far-fetched idea at all is due to the following reason. First of all, he himself didn't like hunting and had nothing but scorn for all hunters. Whenever he could ridicule them, he did. After considering the request outlined in the letter and influenced by his own views on poaching, Hitler decided to adopt the concept and transform it into an actual formation. On March 23, 1940, an advisor in the Ministry of Justice at the time, Franz Gürtner received a telephone call from Himmler's adjutant, SS Gruppenführer Karl Wolff, informing them that Hitler had decided to give suspended sentences to so-called honorable poachers and, depending on their behavior at the front, to pardon them. A confirmation of Hitler's order was sent specifying that the poachers should, where possible, be Bavarian and Austrian, not be guilty of crimes involving trap setting, and were to be enrolled in Marksman's Rifle Corps. The men were to combine their knowledge of hunting and woodcraft similar to traditional elite riflemen with the courage and initiative of those who willingly broke the law. In late May 1940, Dirlewanger was sent to Oranienburg to take charge of 80 selected men convicted of poaching crimes who were temporarily released from their sentences. After 2 months of training, 55 men were selected with the rest sent back to prison. On June 14, 1940, the Wilddienst Kommando Oranienburg Poachers Unit, was formed as part of the Waffen-SS and is subordinated to the SS Totenkopf's 5th Regiment. Himmler made Dirlewanger its commander. The unit was sent to Poland, where it was joined by 4 Waffen-SS NCOs selected for their previous disciplinary records and 20 other recruits by September 1940. The formation numbered over 300 men. Dirlewanger was promoted to SS Obersturmführer by Himmler. With the influx of criminals, the emphasis on poachers was now lost, though many of the former poachers rose to NCO ranks to train the unit. Those convicted of other crimes, including the criminally insane and homosexuals, 394 also joined the unit. From the beginning, the formation attracted criticism from both the Nazi Party and the SS for the idea that convicted criminals who were forbidden to carry arms, therefore then exempt from conscription in the Wehrmacht, could be a part of the elite SS. A solution was found where it was proclaimed that the formation was not part of the SS, but under the control of the SS. Accordingly, the unit name was changed to Sonderkommando Dirlewanger, Special Unit Dirlewanger. In January 1942, to rebuild its strength, the unit was authorized to recruit Russian and Ukrainian volunteers. By February 1943, the number of men in the battalion doubled to 700, half of them Volksdeutsch. It became a Waffen-SS unit again in late 1944. In May 1944, the 550 men, Turkestanis, Volga Tatars, Azerbaijanis, Kyrgyz, Uzbek and Tajiks, from the Ostmusulmanische SS Regiment were attached to the Dirlewanger Brigade. Although other Strafbataillons were raised as the war proceeded and the need for further manpower grew, these penal military units were for those convicted of military offenses, whereas the recruits sent to the unit were convicted of major crimes such as premeditated murder, rape, arson and burglary. Dirlewanger provided them with an opportunity to commit atrocities on such a scale that it even raised complaints within the brutal SS. Historian Martin Windrow described them as a terrifying rabble of cutthroats, renegades, sadistic morons, and cashiered rejects from other units. Some Nazi officials romanticized the unit, viewing the men as pure primitive German men who were resisting the law. During the organization's time in the Soviet Union, the unit burned women and children alive, let packs of starved dogs feed on them, and injected Jewish women with strychnine. Transcripts of the Nuremberg trials show Soviet prosecutors frequently questioning defendants accused of war crimes on the Eastern Front about their knowledge of the Dirlewanger Brigade. Heinrich Himmler noted the brutality of Dirlewanger, noting that the tone in the regiment is, I may say, in many cases a medieval one with cudgels and such things. If anyone expresses doubts about winning the war, he is likely to fall dead from the table. The deputy commander Kurt Weiss has been described as the soldier in Dirlewanger that came closest to matching Dirlewanger in brutality, cruelty and outright sadism, and if there was anyone in the unit who matched the classic profile of a psychopath, it was he. Peter Buchner, who had been a part of the 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf, noted the brutality of Dirlewanger and his men, stating, "Dirlewanger, yes, he was definitely one of those mental cases, a man not at all sound of mind, quite insane in many respects. He was a man you could quite easily imagine standing at the edge of a mass burial pit, full of fresh corpses, masturbating over them. He enjoyed killing. To most of us soldiers, killing was a job, a task we were expected to carry out in the course of our duty, to engage other soldiers in battle. We didn't revel in it like he did. He enjoyed the act of killing, and almost all of those under his command were the same. They were a division of psychopaths who enjoyed raping men and women, girls and boys, and even the elderly were not spared their sexual perversion, and when they had their fun, they then went on a rampage of murder and binging on alcohol." Buchner further noted that Dirlewanger accepted practically any task given to them, ones that even the most battle-hardened soldiers could not do. They were a law unto themselves and often given the worst tasks, because Dirlewanger was crazy enough to do anything he was ordered to do. Without any hesitation or question, he would just go and do it. Hitler liked him for that reason. In Hitler's view, Dirlewanger could do the jobs that even the most battle-hardened soldiers could not bring themselves to do. He ended his remembrance of the division by citing a story from a comrade of his that he had witnessed Dirlewanger men doing. A shocked comrade told me they once raped a woman before wrapping her in barbed wire and roasting her alive over a fire, like a hog on a spit. On August 1, 1940, the unit was formally transferred to the 5 SS Totenkopf Regiment. 1 month later, the unit was retitled to Sonderkommando Dirlewanger. On September 1, 1940, they were informed that they would not be sent to any front lines but instead assigned to guard duties in the region of Lublin, site of a Nazi-established Jew reservation, established under the Nisko Plan, in the general government territory of German-occupied Poland. The unit was reinforced with hundreds of additional volunteers from Sachsenhausen, which contained mixture of poachers, SS men or both element. In September 1940, the unit, now with the strength of approximately 280 to 300 men, began their movement from Sachsenhausen to Lublin by railway, take around 1,014 hours upon arrival. The unit was subordinated to SS Brigadeführer Odilo Globoknik, who served as the Heeresjundi Policy Feroce representative for Lublin. Even thought they received additional training, they were tasked with guarding the ghetto in Lublin, where they often abused the population. According to the historian Matthew Cooper, wherever the Dirlewanger unit operated, corruption and rape formed an everyday part of life, and indiscriminate slaughter, beatings and looting were rife. Even within the brutal regime of the general government, concerns were raised about the unit's conduct. HSSPF Friedrich Wilhelm Kruger eventually demanded the quick removal of the unit from his territory, or he would have the men arrested. The unit's crimes continued when it returned to Poland to help suppress the Warsaw Uprising in 1944. Crimes included the mass rape and murder of 15 Red Cross nurses, and the killing of thousands of civilians. After troops entered a makeshift military hospital, they first killed the wounded with bayonets and rifle butts before gang-raping the women. The naked, bleeding nurses were then taken outside, hanged by their feet and shot in their stomachs. The unit would carry out atrocities during the Walla massacre, in which more than 40,000 Polish civilians were killed in reprisal on the orders of Himmler. The territory of the Byelorussian Soviet Socialist Republic, modern Belarus, was occupied in 1941 and formed part of Reichskommissariat Ostland. In this region, Dirlewanger came under the command of local HSSPF Erich von dem Boxalewski. Dirlewanger gained the reputation of exceeding all others, even amongst the SS, in brutality and depravity. The unit resumed its so-called anti-partisan activities, Bandenbekämpfung. Dirlewanger's preferred method of operation was to gather civilians in a barn, set it on fire, and shoot at anyone who tried to escape. The victims of his unit numbered about 30,000. Some estimate around 200 villages were destroyed and around 120,000 were killed. Dirlewanger also had another tactic to determine which village would be targeted next. He would fly a light reconnaissance plane over any village suspected of harboring partisans. If the plane was hit by gunfire, he would mark the village's location on the map. Later, he would return to the ground and lead an attack, setting the targeted village on fire and killing all its inhabitants as usual. Not long after their arrival in Belarus, they soon found themselves in action. From 2 to March 10, 1942, the unit encountered a strong band of partisans northeast of Ossipovici. They managed to rout the partisans and capture a large stockpile of weapons. On March 12, 1942, they were attacked once again but successfully defeated a large group of partisans near Cherwako. They were later attacked by a larger group of partisans at Klaisew. Dirlewanger then initiated an operation in the forest area southwest of Mogilev. In April, the unit fell under the command of Police Regiment MIT, led by Oberst der Schutzpolizei Leo von Braunschweig. They were tasked with clearing the area near the Drut and Beresina rivers on April 2, 1942, along with police battalions 32 and 307, was sent to the northern area of the road connecting Mogilev and Bobruchsk for local anti-partisan operation. They launched an assault on the villages of Celery and Lushiza, pushing the partisans into the treacherous swamplands north of Batsovici. Dirlewanger and his men had a little success in searching for partisan activity for the first 10 days of May. Eventually, 2 days later, they burnt the village of Sucha under a suspicion of assisting the partisan. On May 24, 1942, Dirlewanger was awarded the class to the Iron Cross Second Class. On May 28, 1942, Dirlewanger was notified that a Ukrainian platoon with the strength of 60 men would be reporting to Dirlewanger's Sonderkommando from May 29 to May 31, 1942. They conducted a local partisan sweep. They burnt 2 villages and shot 5 partisans near Raswata on early June 1942. They defeated a large group of partisan between the area of Orsha and Bastokoli. They would return to Orsha and fought against a band of partisans. On May 16, 1942, Dirlewanger conducted a punishment expedition. After receiving a report of the death of 17 German police officials, ambushed by partisans, the unit spent the rest of the month fighting in Orsha. At the beginning of July 1942, the Sonderkommando took part in an operation with the Wehrmacht in the district of Kleisef. A battle occurred in the area of Wojenichi, and they successfully destroyed a partisan group. On July 9, 1942, Dirlewanger was wounded and would leave the unit and fly to Berlin on July 19, 1942. He eventually was awarded the Wound Badge in Gold on July 12, 1942. As a result of the battle, Dirlewanger lost a single soldier and 6 others were wounded. From July 1 to August 12, 1942, the unit took part in the Operation Adler, an anti-partisan sweep against a partisan group with a strength of up to 5,000 partisans in the area of Babruysk district. On January 26, 1943, a proposal by Dirlewanger for the battalion's special collar insignia was approved by Himmler. This insignia, silver-gray machine-embroidered crossed rifles above a horizontal stick grenade on black wool. The criteria for receiving this insignia were limited to those who had completed their rehabilitation sentence. Members such as Herbert Meyer were issued the insignia after being found rehabilitated. Officers in the battalion were not required to wear the insignia, as it was exclusive to enlisted men. In March 1943, together with the Schutzmannschaft Battalion 118, carried out operations against partisans and civilians in the Smolyaviki and Lohoysk districts. On March 22, 1943, after receiving an alarm signal from the 1st Company of Schutzmannschaft Battalion 118, the battalion's 1st Company was sent to reinforce the recently ambushed platoons of the Battalion 118. Together, they made an offensive operation against the partisan that had ambushed the 1st Company's convoy. They entered and attacked Katyn. The partisan who had taken shelter in the village turned the whole place into a defensive position. Due to strong resistance by the partisans, Dirlewanger's men used their mortars and heavy guns to suppress further resistance. As a result, 34 partisans were killed and the whole population of Katyn was herded into a shed where they were burnt alive by the Schutzmannschaft Battalion 118's men with the assistance of Dirlewanger's troops. Operation Kapus began on May 20, 1943 as part of the German effort to suppress partisan activity in the Vitebsk region. The operation involved police, SS, and collaborationist units operating under the command of the Heeresses und Polizeifeuer, HSSPF. Russland mit und Ruthenian. Among the participating forces was SS Sonderbataillon Dirlewanger. On May 28, 1943, Dirlewanger and his unit took part in the operation and advanced toward a heavily fortified position at Hill 1191, located 5 kilometers west of Palaxy.